The new monitor in the underwriting room was bigger than the one at my own desk, which is probably why I saw the number before anyone said a word. $90,640. I was sitting at the long table at Lakeside Trust Bank with my own refinance file open in front of me. 3 years of on-time mortgage payments. A credit score I had protected like a vital organ. My supervisor, Don Ashby, turned his monitor so I could see it. "Megan," he said, "what is this auto loan doing on your file?" I looked at the line. Vantage Auto Capital. Account opened 5 months earlier. Balance $90,640. Status 60 days past due. Vehicle description underneath it: 2025 GM C Denali Ultimate, black, fully loaded. I had never owned a truck in my life. "There's some kind of error," I said. My voice came out steady. It always does, even when nothing else is. Don didn't look convinced. He'd been a loan officer for 26 years. He knew the difference between an error and a story that hadn't finished telling itself yet. "We can't move forward on the refinance with a derogatory like this on file," he said. "Not until it's resolved." I closed my own folder. I thanked him. I walked back to my desk past 4 other loan officers who had no idea they had just watched the most controlled woman in the building nearly come apart at her own conference table. I am a senior credit risk officer. My job, every day, for 9 years, has been reading other people's financial lives in black and white and telling the truth about what the numbers say. I have flagged fraud on commercial loans. I have caught a falsified W-2 by checking a font. I know exactly what a real document looks like and what one looks like when someone built it in a hurry. I had never once needed to apply that skill to my own name. That was about to change. My name is Megan Holt Reyes. I'm 33. I live in Carver Mills, Ohio, a town of 11,000 people where everybody's last name means something to somebody. I married Marcus Reyes 9 years ago. He's a paramedic with Carver Mills Fire and EMS, the kind of man whose hands stay steady while everyone else's are shaking. We have a small brick house on Hollow Creek Road with a paid-off Honda in the driveway and a budget spreadsheet I update every Sunday night. I grew up 2 miles from that house, in a split level on Birchwood Lane that my father, Gordon Holt, bought the year I was born. Gordon has run Holt Auto Body and Detail on Route 9 for 31 years. He learned to read an engine before he learned to read most other things, and he measures a man by how clean he keeps his bay and how fast he pays his bills. My mother, Carla, worked the front desk at a dental office for 2 decades and still calls every adult child honey in a voice that could talk a hornet out of stinging. I have one brother. Dean Holt is 27, 4 years younger than me, and he has spent every one of those 27 years being the reason the rest of us adjusted our plans. I'm not saying that with bitterness. I'm saying it the way I'd write it in a file. It's just what the record shows. When Dean wrecked his first car at 17, my father paid the deductible and bought him a used Civic the same week. When Dean got fired from the tire shop on Route 40 for showing up late 4 times in a month, my father gave him a job at the auto body shop, where lateness apparently stopped being a fireable offense the moment it was family doing it. When Dean's credit card debt hit $11,000 at 24, my parents paid it off quietly and told me about it only because I happened to be at the kitchen table when the bank confirmation email came through on my mother's phone. I paid my own way through community college working the overnight shift at a gas station, then transferred to a state school on loans I finished paying off at 29. Nobody bailed me out of anything. I used to think that made me strong. For a long time, it just made me invisible. There's a particular kind of love language some families speak, where the child who needs the least gets the least, and the child who needs the most gets celebrated for needing it. My mother used to say Dean just has more on his plate, like his plate filled itself. I used to nod along because arguing with that kind of logic is like arguing with the weather. 2 years before any of this happened, Dean got engaged to a woman named Brianna Cates, 25, who worked at a nail salon on Main Street and posted caption photographs of every meal she ate. My parents threw them an engagement dinner at the house the same month I got promoted to senior credit risk officer. The first promotion of my career that came with an actual title change and a parking spot closer to the door. I mentioned it at that dinner, once, between the salad and the entree. My father nodded and said, "That's good, Meg," and went back to asking Dean about transmission fluid. I didn't bring it up again. I had learned, the way you learn not to touch a stove twice, that good news about me had a very short shelf life in that house. I'm telling you all of this because you need to understand the shape of the family before I tell you what they did to it. What happened to my credit file wasn't a random crime committed by a stranger. It was committed by people who'd spent 27 years deciding, quietly, that my discipline was a resource and not a person. That night, after the meeting with Dawn, I came home and didn't say anything until Marcus had changed out of his uniform and the dog had been fed and the kitchen was quiet enough to hold a hard sentence. "Somebody opened a $90,000 truck loan under my name," I said. Marcus set down the dish towel. "What?" "5 months ago. Vantage Auto Capital. It's 60 days late." I pulled out my laptop. "I need to see my own credit report." He sat down next to me without being asked. That's a habit of his I've never stopped being grateful for. The report loaded slow on our home internet, the way important things always seem to. There it was, in the same font as every legitimate account on the page, sitting next to my mortgage and my one credit card like it had every right to belong there. Vantage Auto Capital. Original loan amount, $90,640. Opened in February. Financed through Crestline GMC, a dealership 40 minutes away in the county seat. 60 days past due as of that week. A notice further down, smaller type, easy to miss if you weren't trained to read every line of a document like your life depended on it. Accounts subject to repossession proceedings if delinquency is not cured within 15 days. I am a person who reads the small type for a living. I read it twice. "I've never been to Crestline GMC, I said. "I don't even know where it is." Marcus was already reaching for his phone. "Call the police tonight." "Not yet," I said. "I want to know what I'm calling about first." He looked at me the way he always looks at me when I choose patience over panic, which is most of the time. He didn't argue. He just refilled my coffee and sat there while I opened a blank document and started a file the way I start every file. A name at the top, a date, a column for facts, and a column for what those facts proved. I called it the Vantage file. It would not stay small for long. The first thing I needed was an outrage. It was a timeline. I am a person who believes that the truth has a shape, and the shape is usually a series of dates that don't agree with each other. I pulled my own work badge access log the next morning, the same record the bank uses to verify hours for payroll. Every swipe in, every swipe out, time stamped down to the minute. I found the date on the loan paperwork, February 11th, a Tuesday, and matched it against my badge history. That Tuesday, I had clocked in at Lakeside Trust Bank's main branch at 8:02 a.m. I had clocked out at 5:47 p.m. The branch is 40 minutes from Crestline GMC in good traffic. There was no window in my day where I could have driven there, signed a $90,000 contract in person, and driven back. Auto financing of that size, at that dealership, required an in-person signature. I knew that because I had underwritten dealer financing referrals for 6 years before moving into risk. A loan that large doesn't get approved over the phone. Someone sat in a chair at Crestline GMC on a Tuesday in February and signed my name on a document while I was 40 minutes away balancing a commercial loan file for a feed supply company. That was the first fact in the Vantage file that didn't agree with itself. I wrote it down in the column marked confirmed, with the date, the badge log printout stapled behind it. I drove to Crestline GMC on a Thursday afternoon, on my lunch break, in plain clothes, carrying nothing that announced who I was. I wanted to see the showroom before anyone there had a reason to be careful with me. The finance manager was a man named Russell Petrosky, mid-50s, reading glasses pushed up on his head, a coffee mug on his desk that said World's Okayest Salesman. I told him my name. I watched his face for the half second of recognition that would tell me whether he'd ever met me. There wasn't one. I think there's an account here under my name that I never opened, I said. I'd like a copy of the signed contract, if that's possible. Russell pulled it up without much resistance, the way people do when they think they have nothing to hide. The screen turned toward me. There was my name. My date of birth correct. My social security number correct. An address that wasn't mine. Dean's apartment on Larkspur Court. A phone number that wasn't mine. An email address I had never used in my life. dolt.business1990@webmail.com. And a signature. I have signed my name on thousands of documents. I know my own signature the way I know my own face. The signature on that contract had the right number of letters and none of my handwriting. The N leaned the wrong direction. The R at the end of Reyes was rounded where mine is sharp. It was the signature of someone who had practiced my name a few times in a notebook and then committed to it on the page that mattered. Can I get a copy of this? I asked. Russell hesitated, but I am very good at sounding like a person who is owed something rather than a person who is asking for a favor. He printed it. 11 pages. I folded them into thirds and put them in my bag like they weighed nothing, which is the only way I have ever learned to carry something heavy in public. On page 9 was the detail that turned a bad feeling into a hard fact. A notarized limited power of attorney, dated 1 week before the loan, authorizing Dean Holt to act on my behalf specifically, in financial transactions including vehicle purchase and financing. My signature at the bottom. A notary stamp beside it. The notary's name was Earl Dunmore. I knew that name. Earl Dunmore had been my father's friend for 30 years. A retired plant supervisor who'd gotten his notary commission sometime in his 50s, so he could notarize paperwork for the shop without paying a service fee every time. He'd notarized my own car title once, years ago, at my father's kitchen table, with a cup of coffee and a joke about how he'd notarize his own funeral if the state let him. A notary commission in Ohio has to be current to be legally valid. It is a matter of public record, searchable in about 4 minutes by anyone who knows where to look, which I did. Because checking a license is something I do for a living when a document looks one day too convenient. Earl Dunmore's notary commission had expired 14 months before the date stamped on that power of attorney. He had notarized a document using a seal that, by law, no longer existed. I sat in my car in the Crestline GMC parking lot and read that expiration date 3 times. Then I called Marcus. Because some facts are too heavy to hold alone in a parking lot, even for someone who has trained herself to hold heavy things. It's not just Dean, I told him. Somebody got Dunmore to fake a notary stamp on a document I never signed. That's not a mistake anybody makes by accident. Who else knew? Marcus asked. And I think we both already knew the shape of the answer, even if neither of us said it out loud yet. I didn't go to my parents' house that week. I am a patient person by training and by necessity, and I have learned that the worst thing you can do with a half-finished case is present it before it's finished. A bookkeeper, and I am, in spirit, exactly that, knows the difference between a hunch and a finding. I had a hunch with very good handwriting. I needed a finding with a seal on it. I called my mother instead, on a Tuesday evening, the kind of casual call that gives a person room to slip. Hey Mom, random question. Has Dean said anything about a truck? There was a pause on the line that told me everything before she said a word. He got a Denali, she said, too brightly. Isn't that something? Your father's so proud. Dean finally has something nice. How'd he get approved for that? His credit's been a mess since the Civic. Another pause, longer this time. Your father helped him structure it, she said. Some kind of arrangement so the rates were better. You'd have to ask your father the details. I don't understand all that. I do not believe my mother understood every detail. I believe she understood enough to know not to ask. There's a particular skill some people develop of knowing just enough to feel implicated and just little enough to feel innocent. My mother has had that skill since before I was born. I let her words sit in the vantage file under a column I had started calling soft knowledge. Not proof of intent, proof that somebody in that house had decided not to look too closely at where a truck that nice had come from. I drove to Holt Auto Body 2 days later, at the end of the workday, when the bay doors were down and my father was alone closing out the register. I didn't bring the folder. Not yet. I wanted to hear what he'd say with nothing on the table but the question. Dad, I said, did you help Dean get a loan using my name? He didn't flinch the way an innocent man flinches when he's accused of something absurd. He flinched the way a man flinches when a bill he's been avoiding finally arrives. It's not what it sounds like, he said. Then tell me what it sounds like. He set down the rag he'd been wiping the counter with. Dean's credit is wrecked. You know that. He couldn't get approved for a lawnmower, let alone a truck he needs for the business deliveries. Your credit's spotless, Meg. You weren't using it for anything. We figured it'd help him get on his feet, and you'd never even feel it. I'm feeling it right now, Dad. It's 60 days late. It's about to get repossessed under my social security number. That's not supposed to happen, he said, and for 1 second he sounded genuinely thrown, like a man discovering his shortcut had a cliff at the end of it. Dean said he had it handled. You signed a power of attorney with my name on it. You had Earl Dunmore notarize it. His commission expired over a year ago, Dad. That's not borrowing my credit. That's forgery, on a fake seal, for $90,000. He didn't answer that part. He looked at the floor of the shop he'd run for 31 years. The floor he kept cleaner than most people keep their kitchens. And he said the sentence that I will remember for the rest of my life. Not because it was cruel, but because of how easily it came out of him. You weren't going to need that credit for anything important. Dean did. I want you to sit with that sentence the way I had to sit with it. My credit, built over 15 years of saying no to things I wanted so I could say yes to things I needed, had been recategorized in my father's mind as a spare part. Something sitting unused in a drawer. Something a family helps itself to. The way you'd grab a wrench off somebody's bench because you knew they wouldn't mind. I did mind. I had simply never been asked. I'm not going to yell at you, I said, and I meant it, because yelling was never going to be the tool that fixed this. But I want you to understand something. This isn't a favor anybody did for anybody. This is identity theft. It has a legal definition, and what happened here meets it. Don't be dramatic, he said. It's family money moving around in a family. Nobody is going to call that a crime. He was wrong about that. He just didn't know it yet. I left the shop and drove straight to a law office in the county seat, a small storefront practice run by an attorney named Renee Castillo, who specialized in consumer fraud and identity theft cases, and had been recommended to me by a colleague at the bank who'd needed her after a skimming incident at an ATM. Renee was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, the kind of person who took notes in a straight line and didn't react to anything until she'd finished writing it down. I laid it all out for her. The credit report, the badge logs, the contract with the wrong signature, the power of attorney, the expired notary commission. She read every page twice. This is clean, she said finally. Cleaner than most identity theft cases I see, because most of them don't come with a paper trail this organized. I'm a credit risk officer, I said. Organizing paper trails is the job. She told me what came next, and it was less dramatic than I expected and more effective than anything I could have done on instinct. File an identity theft report with the Federal Trade Commission. File a police report, which the credit bureaus and the lender would both require to log the fraudulent account. Send a formal fraud affidavit to Vantage Auto Capital with the badge logs and the notary expiration documentation attached. requesting the account be frozen and removed from my credit file under the Federal Fair Credit Reporting Act. Dispute the account with all three credit bureaus simultaneously. Don't confront your family with threats, she said. Don't confront them with anger. Confront them with the paperwork, in the right order. Filed with the right people first. The system does the talking. You don't have to. I filed the police report that Friday with a detective named Lyle Banner out of the county sheriff's financial crimes unit. A calm man in his 50s who had clearly seen this exact shape of crime before, just usually committed by strangers instead of brothers. He photographed every document. He asked for the dealership contract, the badge logs, the notary search printout. He asked me one question that stuck with me for days afterward. Did your brother know the credit was yours, specifically? Or did he think it was some kind of family resource that didn't belong to anyone? I think, I said. He never asked the question at all. Banner opened a formal investigation that same week. He subpoenaed Crestline GMC's full file, including the in-person sign and log from the dealership's visitor system, which placed a man matching Dean's description in the building at 1:40 p.m. on February 11th. The exact Tuesday my badge log placed me 40 minutes away at Lakeside Trust Bank. He sent the signature samples to a county document examiner, who confirmed within 2 weeks what I already knew without a lab. The signature on the loan did not match three independent samples of my handwriting on file with the bank, the DMV, and my own notarized mortgage documents from years earlier. I sent the fraud affidavit to Vantage Auto Capital myself, certified mail, with copies of everything. I disputed the account with all three credit bureaus the same day. I want to tell you that felt like victory. It mostly felt like filing taxes during the worst week of my life, tedious, exact, and absolutely necessary. While I built the case quietly, my family kept living loudly. Dean and Brianna posted the Denali on every platform they had. Brianna captioned a photo of herself in the passenger seat. When your man upgrades the whole vibe, tagging the dealership. My mother liked every post within minutes of it going up. My father commented on one of them. Proud of my boy. Hard work pays off. Hard work hadn't paid for that truck. My 15 years of saying no to things had. Word travels in Carver Mills the way it travels in any town small enough that everyone's mechanic also goes to your church. Within 2 weeks, I started hearing things secondhand, the way you always do. A teller at my own bank, a woman named Patty Quillen who went to the same gym as my mother, asked me out of genuine kindness whether things were okay between me and Dean, because she'd heard I was giving him a hard time about the truck out of jealousy. I told her things were fine. I did not correct the record. I had learned, the way I learn everything, that a record corrects itself faster and more permanently when it's corrected with paper instead of conversation. 3 weeks after I filed the dispute, Vantage Auto Capital's fraud department sent a preliminary letter confirming they had opened an internal investigation and were placing the account in a temporary hold status pending review. The credit bureaus, working off the police report and the FTC identity theft affidavit, locked the account from my credit file within 10 business days. My score, which had dropped sharply when the derogatory mark first appeared, began climbing back. But the account itself, the loan, the truck, the $90,000, was still very much alive, sitting under my social security number, 60 days late and climbing toward 90. And Dean, as far as I could tell, had no idea any of this had happened. He thought he had a truck. He thought my father had handled it. He thought, the way he had thought his entire life, that someone else's discipline was a resource that simply appeared when he needed it. The way water comes out of a faucet without anyone wondering where the pipes run. My father showed up at my bank on a Wednesday afternoon. I saw him through the glass wall of the conference room before he saw me, standing at the lobby counter in his work jacket with the Holt Auto body patch on the chest, looking smaller in that lobby than he had ever looked in his own shop. I went out to meet him because I didn't want him saying anything in front of my coworkers that he wasn't prepared to say in front of a deposition later. Vantage called the house, he said, low and fast. They're talking about a fraud investigation. They want to talk to Dean. What did you do, Megan? I told the truth, I said. On paper. To the people whose job it is to receive it. You could have just paid down the late payments and let this die quietly. It would have been cheaper for everyone, including you. It's not my loan to pay, I said. It never was. You made sure of that yourselves. The day you used my name without asking. This is going to follow your brother around for the rest of his life, he said. And his voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard since I was a kid, and he cracked a rib falling off a lift in the shop. A felony record. Is that really what you want? What I want, I said, is my name back. What happens to Dean's record is a consequence of what Dean did with my name. I didn't write that consequence. I just stopped hiding it. He left without saying anything else. I watched him cross the parking lot slower than I remembered him moving. And for 1 second, I felt something close to grief. The kind you feel for a person you still love, even while you're holding the door open for the truth to walk through and take what it's owed. Dean came to my house 2 nights later. He didn't call first. He never does. He pulled into the driveway in the Denali, 67 days late by then, and walked up to the porch like the conversation had already been decided in his favor. Marcus opened the door. Dean pushed past him the way Dean has always moved through rooms, like the furniture should rearrange itself to accommodate him. You need to call this off, he said. Vantage is talking about repossession, and the cops are calling my work asking questions in front of customers. Do you know what that's doing to me? I was sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of W-2s I needed to finish for a side bookkeeping client. I didn't stand up. Do you know what it did to me? I said, finding out I owed $90,000 on a truck I've never sat in. It's not like I stole from a stranger. It's family. You weren't even using your credit for anything. I was using it to refinance my own house, Dean. The week I found out about this, I got denied at my own job, in front of my own boss, because of a loan with your apartment address on it. His face did something I hadn't expected. Not guilt, exactly. More like the dawning realization that the faucet he'd been drinking from his whole life had a meter on it after all. And somebody had finally read it. Dad said it was fine, he said. Dad said you'd never even know. Dad was wrong about a lot of things, I said. That's not new information. It's just the first time it's cost him anything. He left without another word, and the Denali's tires threw gravel as he backed out too fast down a driveway he'd been driving down his whole life without ever once asking permission. The engagement party, Dean and Brianna's, 6 weeks before their planned wedding, was scheduled at my parents' house on a Saturday in May. My mother had been planning it since the truck first showed up in the driveway, treating the two events like one continuous celebration. The ring, the truck, the wedding, the future, all stitched together into a single bright afternoon she could photograph and post. I almost didn't go. Renee Castillo, when I told her about the invitation, gave me the same advice she'd given me from the start. Let the documents do the talking, she said. If you're going to be in that room, bring the paper, not the anger. And don't bring it unless you're ready for what happens after. I was ready. I had been ready since the night I read an expiration date on a notary search website and felt the last piece of doubt leave my body. I wore a plain blue dress. I brought a flat folder, not a thick one, because by then the case didn't need volume. It needed precision. Inside it, the credit report with the fraudulent account highlighted. The dealership contract with my forged signature beside 3 certified samples of my real one. The power of attorney with Earl Dunmore's notary stamp. The notary commission cert showing the expiration date, 14 months before the document was signed. The badge access log placing me at the bank the exact hour the contract was supposedly signed in person. The fraud affidavit confirmation letter from Vantage Auto Capital. The case number from Detective Banner's office. I am a person who believes a folder, organized correctly, is the loudest thing in any room. The backyard was full by 4 o'clock. Folding tables with a white tablecloth my mother had ironed herself. A banner that said "Congratulations, Dean and Brianna" in silver letters. The Denali parked in the driveway at an angle clearly chosen to be visible from the yard. Washed that morning, gleaming like the centerpiece it had been designed to be. About 60 people stood around drinking sweet tea and eating off paper plates. Neighbors, my father's longtime customers, two of my mother's coworkers from the dental office, Earl Dunmore himself, standing near the cooler in a Hawaiian shirt, laughing at something with my father like a man with absolutely nothing on his conscience. I walked in with Marcus beside me and the folder under my arm, and I felt the particular stillness that happens when a room has decided, without knowing why yet, that something is about to shift. My father found me near the drink table. "You said you wouldn't make a scene," he said, low. A warning dressed as a memory neither of us had actually agreed to. "I'm not going to make a scene," I said. "I'm going to make a record." "Those are different things, Dad. You should know that by now." Dean was at the center of the yard, one arm around Brianna, the other gesturing toward the truck for a cluster of admiring neighbors. 90 grand, he was saying, with the particular pride of a man who has never once priced his own life accurately. Fully loaded. Best decision I ever made. "It wasn't your decision to make," I said, loud enough to carry, not loud enough to shout. "It was mine. You just never asked me." The yard went quiet in patches, the way a field goes quiet when something moves through the grass that doesn't belong there. Dean turned. "Megan, don't. I'm not doing anything to you that you didn't already do to me first," I said. "I'm just doing it where people can see it. The same way you did." I walked to the folding table near the cake and set the folder down. I opened it the way I open every file, calmly, in order. Facts before feelings. 6 months ago, I said, somebody used my name, my social security number, and a forged power of attorney to finance a $90,000 truck. I want to be clear that I'm not telling you my opinion. I'm reading you a record. I laid the first page on the table. This is my credit report from February, before this happened. Perfect payment history, 15 years, nothing late, ever. I laid the second page beside it. This is the loan that appeared 5 months ago. Vantage Auto Capital. My name. An apartment that isn't mine. An email address I've never used. I laid the third page down, the contract, my supposed signature beside 3 samples of my real one. A county document examiner confirmed this signature doesn't match mine. Not close. Not similar. Different. A murmur started, the kind that moves through folding chairs before anyone admits out loud they heard it. I laid down the fourth page. This is a power of attorney, supposedly signed by me, giving Dean the legal right to finance a vehicle in my name. I never signed this. I have never been in the same room as this document until the day I requested a copy from the dealership myself. I looked up, not at Dean, not at my father. I looked at Earl Dunmore, standing by the cooler with a paper plate of potato salad going untouched in his hand. "This is the notary seal on that power of attorney," I said, laying down the fifth page. "And this is a state record search showing that the notary commission attached to that seal expired 14 months before the document was dated." Earl Dunmore set his plate down on the cooler very carefully, the way a man sets something down when he needs both hands free and doesn't yet know what for. "That's not," he started. "It's public record, Earl," I said. "Anyone can search it." I did, on a Thursday afternoon, in about 4 minutes. My mother's hand went to her mouth. My father stood very still, the way he stands when a part is about to fail and he already knows it but hasn't said it out loud yet. Brianna looked at Dean. "You told me your dad co-signed," she said quietly. "You told me it was all clean." "It was supposed to be," Dean said, and his voice had lost every bit of the showroom confidence it carried 20 minutes earlier. Dad said. "Don't," my father said, but it wasn't a denial. It was the sound of a man watching a wall he'd been leaning on for years finally give out. I laid down the last page. This is the badge access record from my employer. I clocked in at 8:02 and out at 5:47 on the day this loan was supposedly signed in person, 40 minutes away from where I was actually sitting. There's also a sheriff's department case number on file, opened 3 weeks ago, and a federal identity theft report filed with the FTC the same week. This isn't a family disagreement anymore. It's an active investigation. Nobody clapped. Nobody cheered. This wasn't that kind of room, and I hadn't built that kind of folder. I had built one for a different purpose entirely. I had built one so that nobody in that yard could later say they hadn't been told the truth, with seals on it, in daylight. That was when the second truth of the afternoon arrived, and it arrived the way real consequences usually do, not dramatically, but on schedule. A flatbed tow truck turned onto the street and idled at the curb. Vantage Auto Capital. Once it received the certified fraud affidavit and the police case number, had frozen and cross-defaulted the account exactly as Renee told me it might, accelerating the repossession clause the moment the loan was confirmed fraudulent rather than simply delinquent. They didn't call ahead out of courtesy. They called the registered address on file, which, because of the very fraud that created the loan, was Dean's apartment, forwarded automatically to the vehicle's last known location through the dealer's tracking service. The driver got out, checked a printed work order against the plate, and started unhooking the winch without a flicker of interest in the party happening 20 feet away. He had done this before. He would do it again that same week, somewhere else, for someone else's bad decision. You can't take it, Dean said, walking toward him, his voice climbing in a way I hadn't heard since we were kids, and he was about to lose an argument he'd started. Accounts flagged for fraud-related repossession, sir, the driver said, not unkindly. I just drive the truck, talk to the lender. Brianna sat down hard in a folding chair, her hand over her mouth, looking at the ring on her finger like it might have a story attached to it she hadn't read yet either. My mother finally spoke, her voice small in a yard that had gone almost entirely silent except for the whine of the winch cable. Megan, couldn't you have done this somewhere private? I tried private, I said. I tried it at the shop. I tried it on the phone. Every private conversation ended with somebody telling me my credit wasn't really mine to protect. I'm done having private conversations about something that was never private to begin with. You posted it online for 2 months. The truck rolled backward onto the flatbed in front of 60 guests. A banner that said "Congratulations, Dean," and Brianna fluttering above a driveway with nothing left in it but oil stains and a folding table covered in certified documents. My father didn't speak again that afternoon. He sat down in a lawn chair near the garage. The same chair he'd sat in every 4th of July for 30 years, and stared at the empty space in his driveway like a man reading a verdict he had, somewhere underneath all his certainty, already known was coming. I picked up my folder, slid the pages back into order, and left. I didn't slam a door. I didn't deliver a parting line for effect. I had already said everything that needed saying, and I had said it with paper instead of volume, which was the only version of justice I had ever actually wanted. The weeks after the party moved the way these things move once the documents start doing their work instead of the family doing theirs. Detective Banner's investigation, fed by the same evidence I'd laid on that folding table, resulted in formal charges against Dean for identity theft and forgery under Ohio law, both felonies, given the loan amount. Earl Dunmore was referred to the Secretary of State's office for notarizing a document with an expired commission, a violation that carries its own civil and criminal exposure, and his name was added to a state database that any future employer or client could search in the same 4 minutes I had spent finding it myself. My father was named as a co-defendant on the forgery charge once the dealership's sign-in log and Dunmore's statement placed him as the one who had physically delivered the paperwork to Crestline GMC and arranged the appointment. Vantage Auto Capital fully reversed the fraudulent account from my credit file within 30 days of the police report being filed, as federal law required once fraud was confirmed. My credit score, which had cratered to the low 600s in the worst week, climbed back to its previous range within 4 months, helped along by a formal letter of exoneration the lender issued at Renee's request, stating in writing that I bore no responsibility for the account and that it had been opened without my knowledge or consent. Dean's case moved through a pretrial diversion process, the kind reserved for first-time offenders willing to plead to a lesser charge, make restitution, and complete a financial literacy course that I privately suspect taught him more about consequences in 12 weeks than 27 years of family safety nets ever had. My father took a plea on a reduced charge as well, with restitution and probation, no jail time, but a felony record that followed a man who had spent 3 decades building a reputation as the most trustworthy mechanic in the county. Old Auto Body lost its insurance referral contract with 2 local agencies within the year, agencies that, it turned out, run their own background checks on the businesses they recommend. Rihanna ended the engagement 4 days after the party. I heard, secondhand, that she told a mutual friend she didn't recognize the man standing in that yard once the folding table was empty and the truck was gone. My mother called me twice in the month after, both times asking for something close to forgiveness without quite using the word, both times pivoting. By the end of the call, to how hard this had all been on the family, I told her, gently, that I understood it had been hard. I also told her that hard and wrong are not the same thing, and that I was not available to manage the difference for her anymore. My father sent a letter 4 months later. No explanation, no excuse, just one line in handwriting I recognized from 30 years of invoices. I used what wasn't mine to use. I'm sorry. I read it twice and put it in the same drawer where I keep the Vantage file, the credit report, the batch logs, the notary search, the 11 pages with my forged name on them. Some apologies arrive at the right address too late to change what's already in the record. I believe him. I'm just not in a hurry to act like the record doesn't still exist. My refinance closed 3 months after the party. Once my score had recovered enough to qualify on its own merits, no exceptions needed. Don Ashby approved it himself and told me, with the particular dryness of a man who has seen every kind of file in 26 years, that mine was the cleanest fraud recovery he'd processed in his career. I got promoted to Vice President of Credit Risk the following spring, the title finally catching up to the work I'd already been doing for years without anyone in my family bothering to ask what it meant. Marcus and I refinished the spare bedroom that summer, the same one we'd been putting off for 2 years because the budget never quite allowed for it while a fraudulent $90,000 shadow sat on my credit file unseen. It cost us $4,000 and 3 weekends. It felt, somehow, like the most expensive purchase I'd ever made, even though it was the cheapest thing in this entire story. I still see my parents. Not often, and not the way it used to be. Sunday dinners happen maybe once a month now. Careful and a little quiet. The kind where the sound of forks on plates does most of the talking. The way it does in a house that's still learning what's allowed to be said out loud. My father doesn't ask me for anything anymore. I think some part of him understands that the asking is exactly what cost him everything he was trying to protect. Dean and I talk occasionally. He paid off his portion of the restitution, working a second job at a parts distributor, the kind of slow, unglamorous repayment that never makes it onto anyone's social media. He hasn't bought another vehicle on credit since. I don't know if that's growth or just the absence of a faucet he used to be able to turn without asking. Either way, the meter's running now, the same way it always should have been. I kept the folder. I'll probably keep it forever. The same way I keep every closed file at the bank, not because I need to look at it again, but because a record, once it's finished, deserves to be filed correctly and then left alone. People ask me sometimes if I regret bringing the papers to that party instead of handling it quietly. the way my father wanted. I tell them the truth. I tried quiet. Quiet is what let it happen in the first place. The only thing that ever actually protected me was paper, laid down in the right order, in a place where nobody could pretend later that they hadn't seen it. I didn't destroy my family that afternoon in the backyard. I just stopped being the only one carrying the weight of what they'd already done. There's a difference between those two things. Even if it took a tow truck in a driveway full of party guests for everyone else to finally see it. My name is mine again. It took a folder, a badge log, an expired notary commission, and one very patient county detective to get it back. But it's back, and this time, nobody is signing it but me.